everybody. Welcome to the Arcview Group's New York Town Hall. This is, I think, the 6th town hall that we've done. And I have to tell you, they're really great because it really affords us an ability to go deep and learn about the nuances of a state's program and the resulting business opportunity. We've really been paying close attention to the content that we're providing on our digital programs to ensure that it's both informative and engaging. So with that said, please share any feedback about this program. It's important to us as we continually seek improvement. In fact, I guess you can use, I think this is right, the email social@arcviewgroup.com. So please respond with anything that you think can be useful. So look, thanks for joining. As many of you know, but maybe not all of you know, that the Arcview Group has really evolved quite a bit over the last year as we built 3 financial services business units. Arcview Ventures, our principal investing arm, which operates the collective fund, which is made up of 78 individual investors who have all pooled their capital together in a committed capital fund to invest in the cannabis industry. Arcview Ventures also acts as a sponsor for a number of SPVs. Arcview Capital, our FINRA licensed broker-dealer, essentially our investment banking arm, and also operators of our crowdfunding platform, now celebrating their 1-year anniversary. Happy anniversary. And Arcview Management Consulting, which is just 6 months old, with well-developed practices in strategic growth and fundraising, federal readiness. Hey, it's going to happen. It's just a question of when. ESG and industrial hemp and research. So why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because we want to hear from you. We want you to know what we can provide this industry. We want to be of service to you as you drive your business forward. So thank you in advance for your consideration. Okay, back to New York. So I would say one of the most exciting things that have happened in this industry over the last 6 months is the lighting up, no pun intended, of the East Coast. An adult rec commercial program was approved in New Jersey in November, and I think it was ratified in January or February. They're now putting together their rules and regulations. As we all know, the New York MRTA was signed into law in March. This is why we're all here today, right? And we have reason to believe that the appointment of the 5-member Cannabis Control Board will be announced very soon. In June, in Connecticut, Governor Ned Lamont signed Connecticut's adult use program into law, as did Pennsylvania's Governor Tom Wolf. Virginia has approved an adult rec program for 2024. That's a bit strange why they pushed it out, but it's passed. Rhode Island's initiative, I think it's passed the Senate. We'll have to see how that goes. So this part of the country is for sure lighting up. A few interesting numbers. The collective populations of these jurisdictions is about 54 million people. And the prospective market opportunity in 2025 is close to 5 billion. And if you add Massachusetts, Vermont, and Maine, the market opportunity is close to 6.5 billion. And I'm sure many are publishing even larger numbers than those. So this is significant. And this is why we're hosting this town hall. And expect us to cover more states in the region in the near future. And look forward to that because I am. All right, we have a really great program tonight, which will be moderated by my good friend, colleague, and partner in the collective fund, Jeanne Sullivan. Our team has selected some compelling panelists, and I sincerely hope you enjoy the session. With that, let me pass it off to Jeanne to begin the program.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks so much. I am Jeanne Sullivan. I am part of Arcview Ventures and Jeff's business partner, and it's really an exciting role and journey that we are all on. So did you know that New York is the largest legacy market in the world? Legacy also means informal, illegal marketplace, thought to be possibly anywhere from $4 to $6 billion. Now, wouldn't it be great to bring that into the legal world? So we have beautiful products that can come from the great states of California and Colorado and the Western states. We want beautiful tested products here. But do you also remember that in the 70s, that New York created the worst set of laws called the Rockefeller drug laws, really draconian, and at its height incarcerated more than 23,000 people just for simple possession of cannabis. This is really dreadful. Now, you do know, of course, that New York State only has 10 licenses, and that's the medical program that started in 2014. Think about that. There's 20 million people in the state of New York, where we live. Think about Oregon, that has 4.2 million people and thousands of licenses. Go figure. So I ask you, is our new MRTA law, called MRTA for short, that was passed, as you just heard from Jeff, on March 31st, is that redemption? Can we do it right? Can the regs that are not even out yet do all the right things to make this good? Well, guess what? We're going to find out some of those answers, because here's what's going on today. You're going to meet an amazing group of thought leaders shortly. Now, everyone here on this discussion is deeply involved in New York legislation and legalization efforts. Our goal today is to look at what do we know, which is a lot, but what don't we know? And there are a lot of piece parts to that. So guess what we're going to do as Arcview? Today is part one, but as soon as we know more, we're going to host part two. And so hopefully that'll be this fall when we do know more, but we'll make sure our timing is good. So what's important is, how do you play? Do you want a license? What do you have to do? Do you want to invest? Do you want to be an advocate? Do you want a job in the business? Hey, why not? As you heard from Jeff, a multi-billion-dollar marketplace is about to take place here. After years of waiting for this, this is really crazy that it's taken so long. Because guess what? California is number one in volume and consumerism and all that. But New York, once we get our act together, will absolutely be number two in revenues, volume, great products. Hey, we're the center of the universe, or so we believe that. And certainly the center of finance, the center of branding and marketing. So we want to make all that happen. So stand by today, because we know a lot. So I welcome our wonderful panelists to turn on your video and your sound. Let's go around the table. Everyone introduce themselves briefly. So our wonderful audience, thank you, audience, for being here today. Members of Arcview, investors, business owners, and business future license holders. Kristin Jordan, over to you. Tell us who you are and what you're working on.
Thank you so much, Jeanne and Jeff and the Arcview team. I'm so thrilled to be here with this esteemed panel of friends and colleagues and professionals in the industry. I'm really excited for this discussion. Jeanne, we've been waiting for this for how many years? 7, 8 years at this point?
Far
too long. And I know we got a lot to cover, so I'll be real brief. First and foremost, I like to introduce myself as a medical patient. I have been a cannabis patient for about 6 years now, 5 years, I think it is, excuse me, 5 years. And that is how I really think about myself in terms of the industry, first and foremost. Secondarily, I am an advocate. I've been part of the Start Smart Coalition from its inception. And I'm very proud to say that we were instrumental in getting the right legalization bill passed under the leadership of Assemblywoman Crystal Peoples-Stokes and Senator Liz Krueger. We've been working alongside both of their organizations for the last 7 years or so, and we're just so pleased to be able to support and promote the bill that is the right bill for New York. I am, as an advocate, I am also the founder of the Cannabis Cultural Association, CCA, located here in New York. The goal for that organization is to bring tools and resources to marginalized communities to participate in the legal industry. And most recently, we are formalizing the Asian Cannabis Roundtable. We are a professional networking organization dedicated to furthering the interests of Asian people in the industry. And lastly, I'm an industry leader. Most recently, I ran the real estate department for one of the 10 medical operators here in New York. And as my side hustle, I run professional cannabis events. Jeanne, you are one of our most favored speakers at the events. We run the Cannabis Real Estate, Media, and Law Summit. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much, Kristen, for that and for joining us today. I've loved being part of your events. Dasheeda, share your background and what you're working on.
Thank you, Jeanne. Thank you, Jeff. So my name is Dasheeda Dawson. I'm also known as the WeedHead. I'm Brooklyn born and Jersey educated, and first and foremost, a patient and global cannabis advocate. After about 4 years in the industry as a strategy and management consultant, I'm really doing a pioneering effort to do my corporate to cannabis crossover. I transitioned into the public sector as the head of the cannabis industry for the city of Portland in Oregon, where I oversee the regulatory licensing compliance, education and equity initiatives for the city's legal, medical, and adult use programs. I'm also the chair for the Cannabis Regulators of Color Coalition, which are really leaders across the country from multiple jurisdictions overseeing and implementing cannabis legislation, and of course, doing so with an equity lens. I'm excited to be here. We've got a lot to talk about. Obviously, I'm very, very, very excited about New York and the MRTA and the work that I've done on the ground over the last 4 or 5 years, and I'm happy to jump into a lot of the topics.
Thank you so much, Dasheeda. We need your brain power and your effort. Now, Barrington, yesterday, Jeffries published a great big research project. It said the top MSOs, multi-state operators, of which you are one, are going to do over 100% of business from where they are today. And Alan Brockstein thinks you are the top MSO of all. He loves you guys. So tell us about what you're working on and your fabulous Cresco lab. And of course, we know your wonderful CEO, Charlie Bechtel. He's been on our Arcview stage many times. Introduce yourself, Barrington. I'm so glad to know you.
Thanks for having me. I'm Barrington Rutherford, Senior Vice President in the Public Affairs Department here at Cresco. I have overseen our real estate department since joining Cresco a few years ago. I've overseen real estate as well as all of our social equity programs, and we're thrilled to be a part of it. Certainly, the study that was released yesterday. Certainly proud of the positive publicity that we're getting, nationally. But I think this is what comes from kind of keeping our helmets on and our heads down and working hard in every state where we operate. It's the path that we've had in New York is similar to our path in every state, which is to be a stakeholder-focused organization and to try to create partnership with our regulators and to be a good partner to them means, it means in the case of New York, as an example, it has meant, bringing medicine to patients throughout the state. We currently operate dispensaries in Brooklyn and also upstate in New Hartford. We're in the Hudson Valley in Bardonia as well as in Long Island. And I think, again, we're just, really, really happy to be a part of the program here in New York and at this really historic moment.
Thank you for that, Barrington, because your view as one of the leading MSOs is important for us to hear. So we want to get back to that, and we will do that. Kaelan, you're in upstate New York. That's an important, very important geography for us. So we welcome you, especially you represent a lot of growers. Talk to us, tell us your background and what you're working on.
Yeah, thank you, Jeanne, and really happy to be here. I'm located right now in Binghamton, New York. We call it the Green Valley of Opportunity, Broome County. It's central New York, but on the Pennsylvania border, for those that are not familiar. And so my family's been in the New York cannabis industry since the 90s. My dad started the first hemp-infused wine in the country right here in Binghamton in the mid-90s. It was a nationally distributed product. And since then, we've gone on to become, the first licensed processor in New York State. And now myself, my focus and my firm, Castetter Cannabis Group's main focus is helping small businesses, farmers, legacy operators, minority entrepreneurs, those that have really been involved on the ground in New York's cannabis industry, understand the regulatory framework and considerations and just the kind of landscape getting into the industry and helping to reduce as many barriers as possible, especially from a knowledge and information perspective. Because I personally have, and my family has a very strong held belief that New York and our cannabis industry that exists here is, the best and can be the biggest in the world, and with the most innovation. And the real question is whether there's going to be a regulatory framework created that allows and fosters that as an industry. We took the first step with an excellent piece of legislation, but that legislation is only, like I said, the beginning stages. And so I also serve as the vice chair of the New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association and co-chair of the policy committee. We're part of Start Smart, and so is Castetter Cannabis Group. And so, we're always engaged on policy and helping policymakers and regulators understand what the realities are on the ground, because there is, a serious disconnection there, I think, a lot of times. So I'm just very glad to be here.
Thank you. Your viewpoint's important. Your input is important to us today to understand how to play. Michael, welcome. Michael Schwamm, partner at Duane Morris, one of the leading law firms in the country and a very substantial cannabis practice. Talk to us, introduce yourself, tell us your background.
Thanks, Jeanne. Pleasure to be here with such a great group of panelists and all those participants out there. Jeanne said, Michael Schwamm, I'm a partner at Duane Morris. We were the first national law firm to enter this sector probably 7 or 8 years ago. And out of our 850 lawyers in the firm, we have about 150 lawyers on our cannabis practice, spanning all the legal disciplines necessary to run, any kind of business. So, from transactional, regulatory, all the way through employment, real estate, zoning, even, water use and the like. We're also a proud Arcview Strategic Alliance partner. We started this year, and it's been a fabulous relationship. My practice has been primarily focused on the transactional space, whether it be capital raising and or mergers and acquisitions. Although starting about April 1st, I've received a flood of inquiries from people who are interested in how one can attempt to get a license. What does it look like? How does, what would one do? I would say, frankly, before that, our practice in New York was somewhat limited, given the fact that there were only 10 licenses. Then we were involved in, some of the licenses and some of the transactions that followed. It obviously was a relatively small, legal market from a legal perspective until just recently. And we're really excited to see how it's all going to play out.
Pretty exciting for all of us. So here we go. Kristin, love to lead off with you to say, what do we know and what don't we know? Go ahead and hit us on what do we know from the current MRTA statute and take us through that, because it's complicated. It's not like other states. In fact, I think it's unlike any other state. Do you?
Jeanne, this is a remarkable piece of legislation. The backbones for our regulations are really poised and positioning us for a really progressive nascent industry. So I'm really excited about that. So I think I'll tee off and set the stage for the 9 adult use licenses, and then we'll carry on with my friend Barrington on the medical operators license opportunities as well. So let's hit the ground running. So the 9 licenses that are new underneath the MRTA, we've got first and foremost our cultivator license, and that is authorizing folks to produce, sell, and conduct business directly with the processors. Now, they can also obtain a processor license. A cultivator can also obtain a processor license, a distributor license for their own specific cultivated product, but they cannot own a retail license. So that is doing away with the verticality of the existing medical market. So that's really important. In addition, no person can have a direct or indirect financial or controlling interest in more than one cultivator license. cultivator license, so that's important. The next license is the processor license, and that authorizes companies to process and sell to processors and distributors only. They can only obtain one of those licenses, and again, they cannot participate on the retail side and the dispensary side. Next, we have a really unique license opportunity for worker cooperatives. Now, those are nonprofit entities for which ownership can be determined under the state statutes governing cooperatives. But those are unique to New York. Dasheeda, you probably know better than I, but I'm not aware of any other state that has implemented that statewide. Okay, you're shaking your head. I think I'm correct in that. So that presents a really unique opportunity, and there's some really great guidelines and role models for other worker cooperatives in the space. Next, we have the distributor license, and that falls under our model for the liquor authority as well, where the distributors can distribute and sell products directly to cultivators, processors, micro business, et cetera. From the cultivators, processors, and cooperatives, and this sell directly to other licensed operators on the retail and on-site consumption side. And then we've got the retail dispensary license, which allows folks to deliver and sell directly to consumers. No more than 3 dispensary licenses can be held by any one individual person, which is important. And again, coinciding with the restrictions on the other licenses, a retail licensed dispensary cannot hold a cultivator, processor, microbusiness, cooperative, distributor, or medical RO license. Next, we've got our micro business license. And forgive me, I'm going through this quickly. We've got a lot to cover. The micro business license allows for limited cultivation, processing, distribution, delivery, and dispensing of their own products. So that is a mini version of the vertical opportunities, very similar to the microbrewery landscape in Brooklyn and other places. Then we've got our delivery license, and those are specifically supposed to be geared and held for social and economic equity applicants, and we'll see how the regulations play out to give preference to those communities. It's very interesting. In promotion of small business opportunities, there is a restriction for the delivery licenses that a maximum of 25 individuals providing full-time paid delivery to consumers per week is the restriction for our delivery licenses. So we're not looking for these big operators to come in. We want small businesses to occupy these licenses. Next, we've got our nursery license, and that allows for the production, sale, and distribution of clones, immature plants, seeds, and other agricultural products directly to cultivators, cooperatives, micro businesses, and ROs for cultivation purposes. And those licenses, very similar to the delivery licenses, are also supposed to be prioritized for social and economic equity applicants as well. Then we've got our on-site consumption license, and this is a real bonus for New York. This was one of the licenses that the advocacy community fought really hard to get, and we're very excited to see what that's going to look like. What we know today is that the on-site consumption licenses, very similar to the retail dispensary licenses, cannot be within 500 feet of school grounds or 200 feet from a place of worship. And all products that will be delivered on site in these locations must be obtained from a licensed operator. And that's it for our adult use licenses. So I'll turn it over to my friend Barrington.
Now, hey, everyone, if this sounds complicated, guess what? It is. So that means you cannot do this alone. You need people who understand this deeply. And if I weren't on a virtual background, you would see I'm holding the statute, which I have in my hand, 128 pages. It is complicated. Boy, it sounds pretty interesting, but who better to tell us than Barrington, who is, as you heard earlier, one of the MSOs, multi-state licenses, and RO, that's what they're called here. There are 10 licenses. They're called ROs for registered organizations. Barrington, now speak to what the current medical ROs are going to be allowed to do, because this is core. It was done for a reason. We'd like to think cleverly. Tell us what it is and tell us your opinion.
So the medical ROs are allowed to continue the vertically integrated businesses that we all currently operate, meaning that we do everything from seed to sale, everything from seed to retail sale. In New York, we will be allowed to expand our dispensary footprint. Today, we are allowed to have up to actually, it's not up to. I think we're actually required to operate 4 medical dispensaries in the state. We will be able to increase to a total of 8 medical dispensaries in the state, and then at up to 3 of those locations, we will be allowed to co-locate adult use sales. So we too will be allowed to participate in the adult use market at 3 of our 8 dispensaries, in addition to all of the rights and privileges that we've had going throughout the term of the medical program.
So let me ask you something kind of just between us. Does that mean you're going to put all 3 in Manhattan? Do you sprinkle them around? How do you think about that? I'm just dying to know that.
It's a great question, and the truth is that we don't know. The regulations are not out yet, and so there's no specificity on where we will be allowed to locate them. But I would guess that the answer is that many of us, including especially Cresco, we operate currently in communities that we are very proud to be in, and communities that we're very proud to continue supporting. So I don't foresee us moving adult use all to Manhattan as an example. I think that we will continue to invest in some of the communities that we're already in, that have been good to us in the medical program, and that we want to continue to support.
And thank you for that. And what is your view as an entity about that legislation? Were you unhappy when you first heard it? Florida, Kim Rivers, just opened up her 78th dispensary, I think on her way to more. So how do you feel about the limit on your retail?
Look, we think the MRTA is great. I frankly think that the limitation on retail is what we want is a healthy marketplace, and the limited license and the limitation on retail serves to create on-ramps for more people, for more diversity in our industry, for small businesses to come in and really thrive in this industry. It creates a more level playing field for the small operators, for the mom and pops, and frankly, for the people whom the MRTA was intended to benefit, those who've been harmed by the war on drugs. So I think that it's great. We're happy to be to have the privilege to operate here, and ultimately just want to be supportive of the true mission of this bill. So we're happy with the dispensaries that we'll be allowed to have, and we're looking forward to helping to grow new ones as well.
That's really beautiful. And it shows, as I told you the other day, the culture from the top, that you all are supportive of this. I love that. All right, Kristin, back to you. Thank you for that great overview, which it's mind-blowing. And you didn't mention one thing, which I love bringing up. Built into the statute, besides social consumption lounges, which you did mention, and we are thrilled, it's baked into the current statute. But something else is too, home grow. And that's pretty exciting. It's got some quirky complexities of timing. So don't everyone run out and plant cannabis in your backyard. I know several people who live in Manhattan that the Con Ed called them up and said, "What are you doing in your apartment?" But that's another story. However, the Garden State, New Jersey, does not have home grow. Go figure that out, everyone, right? So then let's touch on what don't we know, and start with the 5-person Cannabis Control Board.
Yes. So in terms of the agencies that are going to oversee the regulatory side of the industry, so the MRTA sets up the Office of Cannabis Management, commonly known as OCM, and then within that agency, the governor is to appoint the executive director who will oversee and manage the rollout of the licensure process and also oversight for the program as it matures. In addition, underneath the umbrella of the OCM, there will be an appointment by the Cannabis Control Board for a role known as the Chief Equity Officer. And that person and that individual will be instrumental in making sure that the rollout of the regulations comports with the desired progressive nature of the bill. So those two appointments we're hoping will be made in the very near future. With respect to what you had just mentioned and the Cannabis Control Board, so that's commonly known as the CCB. It's a 5-member board. We've got the head of that agency, who will be the chief commissioner, and that is a full-time role. We're waiting for that appointment, with bated breath, hoping that'll come through very soon. And the governor has 2 other appointments to that body, and all of those appointments need to be confirmed by the Senate. And we're hearing a lot of activity from Senator Krueger demanding those appointments be made as they comport with the goals of the bill. We don't really know when these appointments are actually going to happen. We're hearing a lot of noise that the legislature is anxious to approve them to get the ball rolling, because without having these appointments made, we can't move the regulations forward. So all we know is what is in the bill and what those appointments will look like. Other than that, it's anybody's guess.
And just to
Jeanne,
connect the dots to everybody, that means there's no opportunity to apply for a license until we know what the application process even looks like. And I am proud to say that I was part of the first licensing world. Our application was 2,500 pages and did cost a lot of money to do that. And guess what? There were only 43 applications. It's hard to believe, isn't it? What's your guess? How many applications do you think there'll be for these 9 different licenses? What's your guess?
Jeanne, I think we're going to see thousands.
I do too. What do you think, Dasheeda?
Definitely think we're going to see thousands if Oklahoma has over 9,000 licenses already.
That's a riot. So Dasheeda, talk to us about the social equity issues, because you heard Kristin talk about the micro license. And so explain what's going on with social equity, what that means, the definition. It's got, again, some great features. Talk to us.
Yeah, so coming from a regulator's perspective, but also really drawing from a place of advocacy. Again, I'm Brooklyn born. I grew up in East New York. And one of the things that we've pointed out is a necessity is that cannabis legalization laws and regulations, they must remediate every aspect of cannabis prohibition. And so as a result, we have to really start broadening the way we think about equity. And for the Cannabis Regulators of Color Coalition and countless other cannabis equity advocates, that's looking at 4 pillars in particular. That's the economic, environmental, and human aspects of equity. And then, of course, social equity, which is really that fairness and regulations and policy that ensure, really access to all of the other pillars. And so that's why we focus so much on social equity. But in truth, social equity is just the vehicle, whereas the total equity, all 4 of those pillars, is the destination for us. And so when we look in New York, as a New Yorker, someone who worked on MRTA, of course, I'm excited about the way that New York has sort of attacked a much broader view on equity. The framework I use is end, repair, and prevent. And so just some of the things which you guys have called out that New York has done well, I'll call out in that framework. So from an end perspective, adding flower to the medical market, this was, to me, an atrocity that it was missing, given how much of a large percentage of the market it is on the West Coast. The fact that you can share up to 3 ounces, eliminating odor as a policy for policing. That was a big one that happened literally the day after a memo got sent out. And as a person with a big afro growing up in Brooklyn, even though I did not consume cannabis as a young person, I still got harassed by police because I smelled like cannabis coming from parties. And then, as you guys mentioned, home cultivation, that's an equity issue. I should not necessarily, as a patient, have to be reliant on a market to be able to get the medicine that I need. Now, when we think about repairing the harm, we're talking about automatic expungements, eliminating cannabigotry in our policies. So what is that? That is essentially if you've had a previous conviction or any positive test results, you get treated differently, whether you're in public housing or child services and welfare. And so eliminating that ability and protecting parents as well, so from the discrimination if you are a cannabis user. The most important, some would say, is the community impact of the cannabis tax revenue. And that's that 40% of the cannabis tax revenue in total, which we know and we will estimate will be rather large. 40% will be community reinvestment, grants specifically into those communities that have been most harmed. And that was something that we fought for. And again, the city of Portland, where I oversee, where we're the first city to do that, it was great to see that implemented in New York. I'll also just end with preventing the harm is key. And that's where the social equity designation, as far as application and being able to be in the industry, is so important. So let's just call out the fact that there are specific communities that will be included in that designation, as well as minorities, women, and disabled vets, distressed farmers. So that makes it a unique designation as well. That it even includes some sort of race or gender conscious language. And so we're excited about that, but there's a 50% licensing goal. So everything that Kristin just, routed off, there's a goal in total that licenses will be 50% social equity designation. And so
not just the micro licenses, but
not just the micro license, exactly. So that's exciting, right? That's the part we get to build upon.
That is really cool. Now, you said this quickly, but I'm going to underscore it. Guess what? Women are included in the social equity definition. That's pretty cool, I think. Yay. This is pretty exciting.
Jeanne, yeah. I think, one thing, one thing, that's important that we can't lose sight of, that hopefully the regulations will address, is, how we're going to handle the equity needs of these businesses, whether, capital or debt, because these businesses are not cheap to start.
Right.
And how they're going to be capitalized while maintaining their ownership, avoiding predatory investors, so they get to keep a majority and don't get wiped out. But also allowing the social equity applicants after some period of time to transfer the licenses, because ultimately I'm probably the last person to discuss this issue, but in my mind, one of the things that's important is to be able to create generational wealth, out of these businesses. And if you can never transfer the licenses, or the strings to transfer them are so onerous that you can't do it, in my mind, we'll defeat the whole purpose. So it's going to be very interesting to see, how they implement. And also, the goal is 50%. Is it going to be 50% across the board, or is it going to be heavily weighted to certain of the categories that are less capital intensive, and really, give them to the true social equity applicants, and not billionaires who otherwise happen to fall into some of the categories.
Sure. But Michael, today the statute says there's a 3-year limit on the micro licenses, I believe, on transferability. Yes. But now let's address something that you have just brought up that's really worrisome to us. We wanted Arcview Ventures to invest in many licenses right here in the state, certainly on the Northeast. Are we going to be able to do that? The regs are, the statute's not clear. The regs need to tell the story. What do you think? Help us get through that, unpack that for us.
Yeah, it's interesting because, it says, you can't directly or indirectly hold more than one license. We've been in, deep, not me personally, but the firms sort of been deeply involved in our neighbors across the river in New Jersey. And I know one of the things that, that's getting unpacked in their regulations is going to allow capital providers to hold interest in multiple licenses up to a certain percentage. And I think what's getting bandied around now is you can have a 15% interest in up to 10 different license holders, which I think really helps create the capital. You will get firms that will get created or already exist with pools of capital. If you limit it to one, there's no business model for that capital provider. But if they can deploy 15 the capital needs that equate to 15% ownership across 6, 7, 8, 10 licenses, then all of a sudden you are going to be creating, I think, significant opportunities for applicants to fund those businesses, particularly on the social equity side. And we have spoken to a number of groups that are truly interested in helping social equity applicants in this way. But if all they can do is one, their hands are really tied. So we are hopeful that New York will follow the New Jersey model, but politics are politics, and often what's logical and rational doesn't sort of work its way through those channels.
Look, this is a great statute, and we're hopeful that we don't footfault on that issue. Dasheeda, go ahead, talk to us.
No, I was just going to piggyback and say that some of the biggest challenges that we can learn from other states and cities are really what do equity applicants need? And we definitely talk about the funding aspect. So we definitely say incubation and acceleration. And one of the things that is called out in the MRTA is the desire for there to be a social equity incubator. So that, to me, from my perspective as a regulator, means that as the office is built, that chief equity officer position is going to be really instrumental in creating the public-private partnerships necessary to do that. Because I'm not convinced from my private sector experience that the government has enough know-how and insight to necessarily launch their own incubator and run it successfully. To Michael's point, there's a lot of nuance. And so maybe if there is something that New York is doing, I think it's going to be a new public-private partnership space that potential investors can maybe enter in a way that's meaningful.
Well, that's pretty cool. Plus, if they do generate a fund for opportunity that could come from the state, that would help. Both education and financing, both are so critical. Kaelan, over to you. Talk to us about what is going on for legacy growers. What efforts can you do to help bring them into the light? Do they even want that? And, speak to us about opportunity there, especially upstate New York.
Yeah, I think we have two things. First, you got to make licensing accessible. And then you also, a very important word here is amnesty, right? And that goes beyond just saying, okay, you're not, breaking the law anymore. And so, we're not going to, prosecute any crimes before, but also in terms of money, right? In terms of being able, the state needs to allow the use of cash, whether it's for licensing fees or for transactions to buy inventory, et cetera. And I think the state needs to be creative and look at it from a realistic perspective, right? You have very successful entrepreneurs currently right now who have to deal with, violence as a part of their daily life, have to deal with, or previously had to deal with state-sanctioned violence and persecution and this constant anxiety and threat of persecution. And so, it's going to take a lot of outreach to the communities for the state. And then they also have to make it accessible and the lowest barriers to entry possible to get a license, right? The state, 20 million people, tens of millions of visitors, it's a massive market, and so it can absorb a lot of licensing, in my opinion, on the retail side and also the production side. Now, you want to be careful, of course, over production. You don't want to set people up to fail, but if the state is going to look to, say, license a couple hundred retailers, coming from the alcohol business, there's tens of thousands of licensed alcohol retailers in the state. I think, the state needs to look at it and be less anxious about allowing access, right? Because at a certain point, when there is a pretty prolific, marketplace to buy cannabis in New York. People are not going to drive an hour and a half just to go to a dispensary, right? They're probably not even going to drive 45 minutes to go to a dispensary. And so you do need to allow licenses to be awarded at decent numbers. And I also think the state should provide initial funding for these applicants, and whether it's legacy or it's small businesses, priority applicants, the state should provide, whether it's in a vehicle of debt and very low interest loans or grants or a mixture of both, so that people don't have to go to these non-traditional capital markets and give away a very large piece of their business in order to participate in this industry, right? So I think there's those very intentional policies that the state can set up to help them. But beyond the obvious ones is just creating a regulatory structure that isn't overly complicated, that doesn't need teams of lawyers and compliance officers just to stay out of getting fined, right? And so there's a lot of philosophical ways that the state can go about this, implementing a regulatory structure that's really going to help everyone that they say they want to help into this industry.
Sure. I have a lot of friends, in fact, they're on this discussion today, that are hemp growers with New York State hemp licenses. Will that give them an advantage applying for, let's say, an adult use license? Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I think the way I look at it, and the way I tell clients when they come to me is, look at what your existing skill set is and your existing infrastructure, right? And if your infrastructure is going to help you, get production online, or your existing skill set is developing, retail in a certain community, that's what you should look at, and the state has done a great job of spreading all these licenses out. There's all these different opportunities. And by the way, an opportunity that you mentioned, on the home grow side, there's going to be a huge retail market for seeds and clones. And what it's going to serve is just a more educated consumer base. They're going to buy more products in the legal market, right? So there's a huge opportunity. You could set up a grow shop. You don't need a license to sell soil, right? And newts. So there's a lot of opportunities there. In terms of hemp growers, I do think the state needs to look at the existing cannabinoid hemp infrastructure, right? Because New York has one of the more advanced programs and one of the highest, more tightly regulated programs around cannabinoid hemp, non-psychoactive cannabinoids in the country. So there's a lot of infrastructure there on the processing side and also the growing side. But there is 700, I think there's now up to 800 licensees. Are they all equipped, or even the majority of them equipped, to grow high quality cannabis from the beginning? Absolutely not. Right. So we do need to be realistic there. And but I would say, yeah, if you've taken your lumps in the New York hemp industry, and I know a lot of people have, and I across the country too, and you're set up and you've done a lot of work and you're ready to go, I absolutely think that should be a consideration in licensing, especially if it's going to be hyper competitive and cultivation and retail and also processing. To participate, for sure.
Well, that's great. Thank you for that. Michael, back to you. Let's say I want to apply for retail or one of the cultivation tiers. What do I do now? What can I do to prepare? What should I be thinking about and doing?
Well, I mean, and that's a great question, Jeanne. And I think you began to touch on it when you said your first application was 2,500 pages, right? The thing you can't do is wait till the regs and the application come out, right? Because we've all seen what the application looked like in New York for medical. We've seen what it's looked like in other states for medical and adult use. It's a massive amount of work. We know you're going to have a business plan. We know you're going to have SOPs. You're going to have identified your real estate. You look around at other states, you can begin to put that all together now, right? I mean, there is a likelihood that the time period between when the application process is open and it's closed is going to be a relatively short window. And not only will the task be massive, but everybody who you want to help you is already going to be tied up working on other people. And the one thing you can't do is do this yourself, right? You need a team of experts, and notwithstanding what Kaelan said, and I agree with everything he said, other than you don't need a team of lawyers. Obviously, I have a self-interest there, but all joking aside, right? I mean, you'll need consultants, you'll need security experts, and so begin to identify the people you want to help you. It unfortunately is not an inexpensive process, which gets back to the whole social equity aspect of things. And even if the application fee is waived, the cost to put these things together can run into the high 5, low 6-figure dollar amounts. And but unfortunately, to put forth the best possible application to have the highest possible chance of being successful, it's what you need to do. Now, I do know there's been some talk, and I think Kaelan actually put out something earlier today on it, that there's some rumors that New York may go to some type of, lottery system where, they'll have a sort of a pass-fail on the application. And if you're in the pass bucket, it'll be a lottery. And I think the reason for that is in every single state that sort of had a scoring system, lawsuits follow. Because the people who lose think they were unfairly scored. But I don't personally think that's the right solution, because I think you want the best people out there getting the applicants and getting the grants, and putting together your team and putting together a well thought through application is probably the best way to be successful. So the short answer is start preparing now. And then the only thing you have to do later is hit the submit button.
Love it. Kristin, talk to us.
Jeanne, might I just add, so I'm advising a lot of small businesses and startups that are interested in entering the market. And for me, community engagement at this stage is also very, very important. It goes hand in glove with choosing your real estate. And so identifying your local municipal electeds, in addition to understanding what other oversight groups there are that will be looking at your real estate in your license application locally. So understanding what that zoning board looks like, the composition of the stakeholders in your neighborhood, identifying local chambers of commerce, et cetera. So really deploying that community engagement piece is vital, and that's something that can happen ahead of the regulation.
I think that's critical, but stay on
Yeah,
top.
and one point, yeah.
I was going to bring up.
One point on that is yeah. Oh, right, yeah. You and I, we're thinking on the same page, Jeanne, right? I mean, the first thing check is make sure that your community hasn't opted out, because, we get a daily feed of the various, towns and cities and what their governing bodies are saying. And every day there's 6 more opting out. And so there are going to be a whole swath of the state, including probably a large portion of, Nassau and Suffolk County that are going to be, dry counties. And it's, I think, unfortunate. But before you get all excited about doing an application because you have great access to real estate, check first and see where whether they've opted out.
Now, things can change once the regs are out, but speak to the specifics, Kristin, because it's only on certain licenses. So if you want to tell that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So the opt-out provision provided in the MRTA is solely for retail. Cultivation and processing can happen regardless of the municipality's desire to opt out. And so unlike the CRTA that was proposed last year, which only allowed for counties with a population of 100,000 or more, the MRTA, which was passed, allows for municipalities. So that's your counties, towns, cities, and villages. And we're seeing activities, especially up near Kaelan's area in Western New York, where there's already activity. But I'm hopeful. We just saw Long Island, and Long Island is one of those communities that has been talking about opting out for quite some time. We've got 2 counties out there. Riverhead just took a vote yesterday and denied the opt-out 3-2. So I am hopeful.
Well, there you go. So there's some counter that could happen, right?
Yes, they have until December 31st too,
Yes.
right, to make that
My
decision.
reading
That's
of the
right.
statute is that also, that by December 31st. But in some, I happen to know in other states, they've opted out possibly, but then come back in when they saw, guess what? Some terrific local and state revenues, some personal opportunities to grow a business. So go figure. Barrington, did you want to add to that?
I was just agreeing with you that
Yeah.
that's exactly what we've noticed as well. That once that municipalities may opt out, but once they realize that whatever it is they're fearing doesn't happen, yet the revenues are going to buy fire trucks and build new schools in their neighboring communities, they very quickly want to come back in. In fact, we've asked that we made a point of suggesting to policymakers in New York that if you can create an opt-out provision, but also create the opt-in provision, because it won't be long before those communities want what their neighbors have, which is a healthy marketplace. That it's new revenue, right? It's a healthy marketplace for small businesses to exist and operate and provide new revenue for these small towns, especially now that are suffering in the sort of post-pandemic sort of economic rebuild phase. Like, it's a really important opportunity, and they'll want back in very quickly, I think.
That's good. And your observations and thoughts
Yeah.
about other states, it's critical to understand what we could do better, just learning. We have a great history here with other states. Michael, were you suggesting something?
Yeah, I think the key to this is educating the general population. I've listened into a number of town council meetings, because you can do it on Zoom, and the public perception. The I guess favorite or least favorite one I heard was, we don't want a dispensary in our town because it's going to bring the Mexican drug cartel, gangs, and prostitution. And it's just sort of a lack of understanding of of what this marketplace is, and the product, and the health and wellness aspects of it. And so I think one can do a lot with educating people to allay those fears. It's probably the same thing that happened right after Prohibition with liquor stores, and look where they are now.
There's no doubt the stigma is still alive. We all have to do our part to lift the stigma. And all I can tell you is our friend Steve D'Angelo, who was in New York recently, said it is his thrill to walk down the streets of New York and smoke a joint. So I love that. So it's great.
We've all been doing that.
Fun for me to introduce my friend, Sarah Favo, who's on the Arcview team. Sarah, welcome. Over to you.
Jeanne. Thank you to Jeanne and all of the panelists for this amazing conversation. This is really just part one. We will definitely be having a part two, but I want to thank you all, and thank you to the audience as well. And before we close out, we have a short 5-question survey that will remain up until the end of the program, and we'd love to hear from you. So please share your thoughts in today's discussion, and also let us know what you'd like to see next from the Arcview group. And in addition, please visit us at arcviewaccess.com and Arcview social media for all the latest activities and events at Arcview. Just wanted to thank you all for joining me today, and we will see you on the next program. All right, bye.